started. Roger, 0G, I feel fine. Godspeed, John Glenn.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground.
New possibilities are opening up for scientific cooperation between countries.
2, 1, 0, 0.
Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Discovery, go and throttle up.
Discovery, Roger. Go for deploy.
Thanks, Karen, and to everybody in the shuttle program. The crew is go for launch.
Roger. Nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
Good evening from Mission Control in Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center. As we go on the air, you are looking live at the passageway between the Harmony module of the International Space Station and the connecting tunnel leading to the SpaceX Dragon Freedom that is housed at the moment on the zenith or space-facing side of the Harmony module. It is through that passageway that NASA astronauts Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore, along with NASA astronaut Nick Hague, the Dragon commander, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Aleksandr Gorbunov will be floating through a short time from now, closing the hatch behind them and making final preparations for their undocking from the International Space Station that is scheduled at 12:05 a.m. Central Time, 1:05 a.m. Eastern Time, the home stretch for Williams and Wilmore to complete an extended 9.5-month mission in space. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is a momentous night to begin the journey home for Crew-9. Williams and Wilmore, having launched back on June 5th on a Boeing Starliner spacecraft, propulsion system issues resulted in a decision by NASA to bring Williams and Wilmore home on the SpaceX Dragon Freedom spacecraft. Crew-9, that meaning Hague and Gorbunov, launched with 2 empty seats aboard Freedom back in late September, clearing the way for Williams and Wilmore to join them on the ride home, the beginning of which will occur just about 2 hours and 12 minutes from now with the undocking of Freedom from that space-facing port on the Harmony module. At the time that the Dragon splashes down in the Gulf of America off the Gulf Coast late Tuesday afternoon, Williams and Wilmore will have spent 286 days in space, 285 of which aboard the International Space Station. They will have completed 4,576 orbits of the Earth in a mission spanning 121.3 million statute miles. Hague and Gorbunov's, their mission duration, 171 days, 170 days of which aboard the International Space Station. Their mission will have spanned 2,736 orbits of the Earth, 72.5 million statute miles. The Crew-9 departing crew, they have donned their garments, their undergarments, if you will. Nick Hague, just off on the right side of your screen. They will be assisted through that hatchway to close the hatch behind them. That hatch closure expected about 30 minutes, perhaps a bit less than that.
Freedom, Houston, on 2, standby for big loop audio config.
Copies, and I'll need 2 minutes before I can do a comm check.
We copy.
Spacecraft communicator Tess Caswell here in Mission Control in Houston, part of the Orbit 3 team, who will be talking to the crew members as they complete the hatch closure and then subsequently the undocking of the International Space Station. She is part of that Orbit 3 team that is led by Flight Director Marcos Flores tonight. He is the lead flight director for the Crew-9 mission. In the foreground, popping in and out of the field of view, is NASA astronaut Anne McClain, the commander of the Dragon Endurance that automatically docked to the forward port of the Harmony module in the wee hours of Sunday morning to initiate about 1+ days of handover activities with the Crew-9 crew. The abbreviated handover was specifically designed to provide as many undocking opportunities as possible for Crew-9 The decision to bring the Crew-9 crew back to Earth on Tuesday was dictated by what is forecast to be pristine weather conditions at the various landing sites in the Gulf of America that the Dragon Freedom will be coming home to late Tuesday afternoon, with splashdown scheduled at 4:57 p.m. Central Time, 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time. Nick Hague, the commander of the Dragon Freedom, floating through the hatchway. We will see Williams and Wilmore shortly as they are completing their suit-up activities. The final suit-up will take place once the 4 crew members are inside Dragon and the hatch is closed between Dragon and the International Space Station. The station hatch on that side of the docking interface will be closed after the Dragon hatch is closed. Wilmore and Williams have performed informal suit and seat fit checks on orbit using 2 spare suits on the International Space Station. The SpaceX team supported this effort and gathered data to make an informed decision on the suits that they would wear on the ride home and the seat sizing. A new suit was actually flown up for Butch Wilmore on the Crew-9 mission that arrived on the station at the end of September. Wilmore and Williams also performed suit donning and doffing activities to familiarize themselves with the suits and with Dragon systems during the handover between Crew-8 and Crew-9 back in September. And this is not a new activity for Williams and Wilmore. They actually were aboard in those suits during a port relocation that transferred the Freedom spacecraft, the Dragon Freedom, from the forward port of Harmony to the zenith port of Harmony back in November. Once Williams, Wilmore, Hague, and Gorbunov depart the International Space Station just over 2 hours from now, the 7 crew members left aboard the International Space Station will continue the Expedition 72 increment led by the commander of the station, Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexei Ovchinin, joined by his cosmonaut colleagues Ivan Wagner and Kirill Peskov, Peskov having just arrived on the station as part of Crew-10. Also continuing on in orbit, NASA astronauts Anne McClain, Nicole Ayers, and Don Pettit, and Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Takuya Onishi. Don Pettit will be coming home in late April, April 19th, in fact, U.S. time, on the Soyuz MS-26 spacecraft that he rode to orbit in, along with Ovchinin and Wagner from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. The International Space Station is currently flying 260 miles above the Earth, currently crossing the southeastern coast of Africa, moving in a trajectory from northwest to southeast in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator. At the SpaceX Mission Control Room in Hawthorne, California, the SpaceX flight controllers are reporting that all of Freedom's systems are in excellent shape. Nick Hague there, as you see on your screen, stowing some last-minute items aboard the Dragon spacecraft that he is commanding from undocking through splashdown. The weather has been monitored for the splashdown sites in the Gulf of America throughout the day. The reports continue to be that the weather is forecast to be excellent for Dragon's homecoming on Tuesday afternoon. From the time of undocking through splashdown, it's a fairly short phasing, as they term the ballistics end of the operation. About 17 hours of transit between the time the Dragon will undock from the International Space Station and the time it will splash down. Again, splashdown off the coast of Florida in the Gulf is scheduled for 4:57 p.m. Central Time, 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday afternoon. We should be seeing Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore shortly. At the time of splashdown, predicted to be Tuesday afternoon, Williams again will have logged 286 days in space on this, her third flight, and a total of 608 days in space, the second most by any American astronaut, right behind Peggy Whitson, who has 675 days in space on her bio. Butch Wilmore, with his 286 days in space at the time of splashdown tomorrow, on this, his third flight, will have logged 464 days in space. Nick Hague, wrapping up his third mission with 171 days in space, will have a total of 374 days in space, to his credit. And again, Aleksandr Gorbunov of Roscosmos ending his first flight into space with a splashdown tomorrow and a total of 171 days on his biography. We are moving into a brief handover between satellites on the Tracking and Data Relay Satellite System. There you see a view of us here in Mission Control in Houston at the Johnson Space Center in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Once again, the flight director in charge of tonight's operation is Marcos Flores, the lead flight director for Crew-9, joined on console by spacecraft communicator Tess Caswell, whose voice you will hear talking to the crew periodically during the time frame between now and hatch closure, and then between hatch closure and undocking, through the time that the Freedom spacecraft leaves what is called the approach ellipsoid. Basically, I term it the neighborhood of the International Space Station, at which point integrated operations between the Johnson Space Center and Hawthorne will come to an end, and it will all be in Hawthorne's hands to bring the crew home.
SpaceX copies LIO unsealed at 0258 Zulu. Continue with IMV duct teardown and hatch closure.
And Freedom Houston on the big loop. Sounded like a good comm check with SpaceX. At your convenience, we'll take a comm check with us.
And Houston, Freedom's got you loud and clear.
Copy.
With those voice checks between Nick Hague and the SpaceX Mission Control Room in Hawthorne and the Flight Control Room here in Houston, you're seeing Don Pettit and Alexei Ovchinin taking photographs of Butch Wilmore in his entry suit. Suni Williams is in the foreground near the hatchway. Once again, there are two SpaceX Dragons at the International Space Station. The one that the Crew-9 crew will be departing in a couple of hours from now is on the zenith or space-facing port of the Harmony module. The newly arrived Crew-10 crew docked early Sunday morning to the forward port of Harmony in their Dragon Endurance. And you see at the hatchway the 4 departing Crew-9 crew members posing for some final photos. Final handshakes and hugs between the departing Crew-9 crew members and the crew members who will remain on board the International Space Station, maintaining a continuous human presence on the orbital laboratory that began on November 2nd, 2000. Once again, we're in a brief handover between satellites that provide the downlink TV capability from the station. We'll be regaining that downlink TV just a moment or two from now. You saw the Crew-9, 2 of the Crew-9 crew members, Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore, already in their entry suits. Nick Hague and Aleksandr Gorbunov will don their suits once inside Dragon. Hague and Gorbunov flew up to the International Space Station back on September 28th. So they're wrapping up a mission almost 6 months in duration. Williams and Wilmore, of course, with their extended mission in the home stretch of a 9.5-month flight spanning 121.3 million statute miles. And now inside Dragon, you see Butch Wilmore on the far left. In the center of your screen, Aleksandr Gorbunov. Nick Hague on the far right. They will settle into their respective seats aboard Freedom as countdown clocks here in Mission Control are ticking backward toward the time of the command to initiate the opening of hooks holding Freedom to its docking port on the space-facing side of the Harmony module. That command to be issued about an hour and 55 minutes from now. The actual physical separation, what we peg as undocking for the history books, is scheduled at 12:05 a.m. Central, 1:05 a.m. Eastern.
SpaceX copies on hatch closure. We'll send a command momentarily to transition the state machine to hatch closed. You can reference your hatch closed event details for a few actions and then complete suit donning per procedure 4.010.
Freedom copies all.
And Nick Hague aboard Freedom confirming that Dragon's hatch to the International Space Station is closed That call coming at 10:05 p.m. Central Time, 11:05 p.m. Eastern Time. So the Crew-9 crew now safely aboard the Dragon Freedom will complete their suit-up procedures, do systems checks. There will be a series of leak checks between Freedom and the International Space Station at the docking interface. You see Suni Williams on the far right-hand side of your screen. She will be seated next to Nick Hague, the Freedom commander. To Hague's right will be Aleksandr Gorbunov, and you see Butch Wilmore on the far left. The undocking between Freedom and the International Space Station will take Freedom above and behind the orbital laboratory through a series of what are known as departure burns. Freedom then will swing below the space station on a trajectory for the deorbit burn, a 7-minute, 29-second braking maneuver that is scheduled at 4:11 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday afternoon, 5:11 p.m. Eastern Time. That will slow Dragon down by more than 50 meters per second, allowing it to drop out of orbit for its high-speed entry back into the Earth's atmosphere and a parachute-assisted splashdown off the coast of Florida. Once again, the 4 Dragon Freedom crew members you see in this view. Butch Wilmore on the far left, Aleksandr Gorbunov with his back to the camera, Nick Hague just out of the field of view, and Suni Williams on the far right of your screen. The hatch was closed at 10:05 p.m. Central Time, 11:05 p.m. Eastern Time. The station hatch will be closed just a short time from now, enabling a series of leak checks to occur to make sure we have an airtight seal before the pressurization of pressurized mating adapter number 2 can begin. The vestibule will be depressed to vacuum, setting the stage for the initiation of the commanding of the opening of the hooks holding Dragon in place and the physical separation of Dragon from Harmony, with undocking scheduled at 12:05 a.m. Central Time, 1:05 a.m. Eastern Time. If you're just joining us, you're looking live inside the SpaceX Dragon Freedom. The Crew-9 crew all on board. On the far left, Butch Wilmore. On the far right, Suni Williams, who launched back on June 5th aboard a Boeing Starliner spacecraft, returning on Tuesday aboard the Dragon Freedom to complete what will be 286 days in space, 285 of which will have been spent on the International Space Station. Just to put their long-duration mission into context, it is not the longest mission in the history of U.S. spaceflight, the longest single mission. That distinction belongs to NASA's Frank Rubio, who had his mission extended due to a coolant leak on the Soyuz spacecraft that he was launched on from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. A replacement Soyuz was launched by Roscosmos. Rubio came home subsequent to that with a total of 371 days in space. Behind him, Mark Vande Hei, NASA astronaut, logged 355 days in space. Scott Kelly, 340. Christina Cook, 328, and Peggy Whitson, 289.